Okay. Well, good afternoon, GrillRB. Uh, so happy to be here and see you all and have this echo. It gives me power. Little bit about me. My name is Ramon. I live in Vienna, in Austria. It's my first time in Poland. I'm super excited to be here. I took a night train and I arrived here at 5 in the morning. I thought I was going to be able to sleep, but I didn't really get much rest, so I came here and I passed out right away. um, you might have seen my picture on the website for today's conference, and you might be wondering where's the dog. And don't worry, I've got you covered. This is Fiona. She is the love of my life. She lives with me back home. What I love about her is that she's got these eyes that have so many expressions on them. And she can tell so many stories. My favorite is this one at the top right, where she's judging my wife as she eats lunch. We have this word in Spanish. It's called regalona. It kind of means, gets what she wants. She's kind of spoiled, but we love her. And I thought, okay, I'll try and translate it into English so you can understand it. Unfortunately, I didn't have much luck translating it into English. So I thought, okay, I'll try Polish instead. And what I found interesting is that I don't know what regalone means. Nothing? Interesting. Did I lose audio? Shall I talk louder? No, probably not a good idea. Hello? Nope. I can shout. I hope the battery on this thing. This is on. Shall I just use a regular microphone? Hello? Hi. Oh. All right, back to business. Right, so let's get right down to it then. So as I mentioned earlier in my slides, I'm a freelancer and I do a lot of work in Ruby, and I really enjoy it because what I like about freelancing is that I can be working in a restaurant canteen one day, and then the next day I'm working on solar panels, working with solar panel manufacturers to get apps out to users. And the one area I'm going to talk to you about today is the restaurant business, the restaurant catering business. This one client of mine, they're called Takeaway.io, right? And they provide 3 services. One is catering for events. The other one is cafeteria lunch for workers in industrial areas. And the third is having a restaurant that people can come and visit. And where my work comes in mostly is with this cafeteria lunch. What happens is the factory workers will make orders for lunch for the coming week on their mobile device or on their laptop, and then on that very day they will prepare the food and bring it to them. And so we've been working with a lot of clients of this restaurant to get everything to their desire. When we onboard new clients, they ask us, oh, can we have this checkbox here? Can we have this checkbox there? Can we have this special export of data just for us? And so my work comes with satisfying all of these clients' needs. So when onboarding this one client earlier last year, they came to us and said, this looks great, but our factory workers don't actually have time or access to their devices. So what we would like to instead have is a place in the cafeteria where they can scan their chip card and order food from a touch screen. And of course, ever the one to comply, I said, yes, sounds good. I like to give my projects fun names, so I called this one Project Hairnet. Now, the way Project Hairnet works is we'll have one use case where users scan their chip card, they will see what's available for lunch for the next coming week, they'll place their orders, and then on the day they'll get their food and enjoy it accordingly. So when this opportunity came up, my mind was all immediately racing with all the possibilities. I was thinking to myself, oh, we could have a native app that they could that the terminal could have, and it could be a React app with a REST API for the backend, or we could manufacture special terminals. And yeah, as I went with this, my client, who is the chief of the company, who is master's in computer science, basically said, "Slow down, Ramon. There are other options. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We already have a perfectly well-functioning Rails app that users use to order their food. So why don't we just build it on top of this existing app?" So, okay, first thing we need for Project HairNet is some hardware. So obviously, in order to scan your chip card, you'll need a chip card scanner. Can everybody see this? It's kind of fade here. Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah, so we'd need our chip card scanner. We'd need a computer with a touchscreen. What we ended up going with is an all-in-one PC with a touchscreen on it. So it runs Ubuntu and Chromium, because all we'd need is a web interface. And believe it or not, that's it for hardware. Next up is security. If you're going to have a device in a cafeteria that is not being actively monitored by us, we need to make sure that people can't just come in and tamper with your hardware to either access customer data or play games on it or something. So the first thing we did was create what's called a kiosk mode for this terminal. So what a kiosk is a dedicated mode for Chromium that allows, or other browsers, that lets you have it be full screen and disallow users from being able to exit the browser, which, as you can see in this terminal command, is perfectly doable, and it works perfectly well until somebody comes in with a nice little keyboard, presses Alt and Tab, and then all of your efforts for security are lost. Fair enough. Turns out, it's a bit windy, sorry. It turns out that there's a way to not only have Chromium be full screen, but the entire Ubuntu system. So I found this blog post that I recommend checking out. What it does is it allows... Sorry. So what it does is... Can everybody hear me fine, or is it like... Okay, I'll continue. What it does is it allows you to set up Ubuntu so that on startup, the first thing you see is this, right? Which I know doesn't look like much, but believe me, it's very exciting, because it means that there's no access to the desktop, there's no access to files, you can't just right-click and start a terminal and start messing around. So that's good. Then we need to have the security of allowing users to get onto the system. As you can see with my really good handwriting here, with a mobile device or with your own computer, what you need to do is access the system, log in, and then order your food accordingly. However, for the terminal, what you need to do is scan your chip card for identity. So we need to have a new way of identifying users. And of course, separate these two so that only the terminal has access to this terminal interface. You know what I mean? Only the terminal has access to this interface for scanning chip cards. Now, it turns out that what we did was to have a check. When you load up this controller, that checks that we have our own built-in authentication token that tells our system this is the terminal requesting the chip card terminal interface, which works all well and good. This way we're able to check if we're in kiosk mode and also authenticate users so that they can come in and scan their chip card accordingly, which is all well and good until you hit the part where we need to pass this authentication header from the terminal itself to our web app. And I don't know about you, but I've never run into a situation where my browser instance needs to pass an authentication token in the form of a HTTP header from itself to the app. So I looked around. I found a Chrome extension that's pretty nice. It lets you pass in it lets you define which headers you'd like to pass along. The problem with this is that you add the dependency of a Chromium extension, which then puts the onus on the developer of the extension to keep it up to date. And of course, security issues come from that. Not to mention, in theory, someone could come in and tamper around with it. So the solution we went with instead was to use Electron. Everybody heard of Electron? Or let me put it this way, anybody not heard of Electron? Okay, cool. What Electron allows you to do is it allows you to build native apps that work in a Chromium instance, mostly based on JavaScript. So what this allowed us to do was to open this Chromium instance and pass in this HTTP authentication header as a parameter to that Chromium instance. So with that, I was able to take care of loading up the terminal. It passes along the authentication token, and then the according screen where it says, please scan your chip card, is taken care of. So what I learned from this security stuff is that it's important to have a kiosk mode when you're working with dedicated hardware that you're not going to supervise, and also restrict the tampering with the headers themselves if you want to restrict them to that service itself. Next up, we got the actual chip card scanning. So I'm going to show you a brief screenshot here. I apologize, it is in German. It says, welcome, please scan your chip card. Now, what is supposed to happen in this screen is that you come up to the chip card scanner, you scan your chip card, it goes beep, and then it passes along a piece of data, usually an identifier linked to your user, onto the web app, and then which then logs you in and lets you order food accordingly. Now, we were given these chip card scanners. We were given a sample of what are called NFC logic cards, which store this data on the card themselves. Now, I needed to build a firmware into the chip card scanner itself that knew that when you would scan this chip card, after the little beep, it would extract that data from the card and pass it on to the web app. Now, I got in touch with the manufacturer of the chip card scanner, and they were very helpful and pointed me to this, which looks like something out of Windows Vista from the mid-2000s, even with the name App Blaster, which I'm in love with. With this, I'm no expert on this, but this terrified me when I first loaded it up. With this app, I was able to flash firmware onto the chip card scanner, and with that, load up the data from the card. So I thought, and they gave me a sample of their code. Don't worry about the code. I made it purposefully small so that you see it's a lot just to do something like a beep, right? So I thought, okay, this looks doable. It's like a subset of C. I did C in university. I can do this. So I gave it a try. It took me maybe about a week until I finally said, okay, I've gotten nowhere. I give up. I'm very frustrated. So what I then did is that I thought, okay, well, I could continue trying frustration to do this, or I'm going to reach out for help. So I reached out to the manufacturers, not of the chip card scanner, but of the card themselves. So I gave them a call, and in about 2 minutes of talking to them, including wait time, I found out that not only is the data on the card itself encrypted, but the memory location on the card of where that data is also encrypted. So there was no chance, unless I signed an NDA with the logic manufacturer, that I would get access to this piece of data. So what I did instead is I told them, okay, here's what I'm getting out of the card right now. It's giving out some sort of memory dump. Please help me out. And within half an hour, they sent me a firmware. They asked me to please open this monstrosity App Blaster again. And they said, please just load it, you'll be fine. And lo and behold, not only was it able to load up the identifying number on my chip card, but it also did it with a carriage return, with a return key. And I thought, I can use this. So going back to the page itself for scanning chip card numbers, now that I know that I'm getting a return key and that it's being interpreted as a keyboard, I thought, well, wouldn't it just be easiest if on the screen I just have a text field tag? Because really what I'm doing, instead of having some sort of dedicated JavaScript runtime waiting to catch keyboard events, if I just have a text field tag where you input the card number, I mean, sure, you should be a text field tag is for typing, but that's what this device is doing. It's typing. So I thought, okay, this works. I showed it to the client. He said, yeah, it's good, but you know, when the problem is that once you load this page, you still need to have it be ready to accept that chip card. So I thought, okay, well, we've got an option in Rails that lets us autofocus. That's one more problem solved. Once that was done, the problem was that if you tapped around, then it would still lose focus. Or if the screen goes off and then you turn it back on, if it's been idle for a while, the field would still lose focus. So I thought, okay, well, then I'll just throw some JavaScript in there so that when the screen comes on, it'll focus that field automatically. And then I showed that to my client. He said, this is all well and good, but I don't want to see this text field. It looks too hacky. So I thought, okay, then I'll just make it invisible with CSS. And what I want to tell you by showing you this is that even though it sounds hacky, maybe a hacky solution is just not necessarily the worst one. It works. It's been running for over 9 months. Why not try these things out? Also, very important, if you're stuck, don't spend too much time, just bashing your head against the problem. There are people who know this stuff, so ask for help. All right. Next point in Project Hairnut is about stability. So here's what happens. The aim is for this system to run without me being there to monitor it and make sure that it's up and run. Sorry. Lost my voice there for a second. It's to make sure that it's up and running. So here's what could happen while I'm gone. There could be a thunderstorm. There could be a power outage. God forbid someone can come around and start messing around with cables. What we need to do is to make sure that this system stays on even though I'm not there. So I played a little bit around. I did some searching, and it turns out, does anybody know what this is here? This is what's called the BIOS of the computer. When you turn on your computer and you push a few keys around, you can enter this DOS-looking screen where you can change some metal down to the metal settings of the computer. And one of them that really helped me out was this after power loss option that you can see the cursor on. So what this does is that if the computer were to get powered out by a power loss, once the power is restored, it would automatically turn back on, which is fine. That allows it to turn back on, say, if somebody trips over a cable or those other examples I showed. But what if there's a real problem? What if somebody needs me to get into that device and make sure that it's up and running again? What basically needs to happen is that, as you can see in this very scientific diagram, I need for a way for me to be able to connect from my office at home to the terminal at the restaurant business. And so my client and I, we threw around a few ideas. We could just have an SSH remote access. The problem with doing an SSH remote access is for me to be able to connect directly to the device itself, it would require opening up a port and open it up to the world. So that was out of the question for my client. Then we said, okay, what about VNC, screen sharing? The problem with that is very similar. You open it up for tampering. So that was out. Then there was physical maintenance, where I would have to commute for an hour and a half to this company and make sure that that was up and running. That was definitely not an option for me. So once we were going through these ideas, my client at some point made a suggestion. I'll remind you, he has a master's in computer science. I don't even have a bachelor. He said, why not use reverse SSH tunneling to do the job? Anybody heard of that? I see a few hands. I hadn't heard of it, and frankly, it looked like some sort of magic. Reverse SSH tunneling. It sounds like some sort of weird magic. So I'm going to show you some reverse SSH tunneling because I find it quite interesting. You see, what you do is instead of as connecting directly from your device to the terminal, what happens here is that I'm using this program called Auto SSH to connect the device to our server, our takeaway server, and then the takeaway server will forward all requests that I make to a specific port straight onto the terminal. So, oops, sorry. Right, right. So the way it works is that you specify a port that I'll connect from my laptop to takeaway, and then I'll specify a port that takeaway will relay that to. And what's great about that is that I'm able to connect remotely using that port that I specified. So I can forward all VNC and SSH requests via the secure takeaway server straight onto the terminal. And with that, I'm able to freak out all the cats I like. So there are a lot of things that you can do to make sure that your devices are kept up and stable. Reverse SSH tunnels, by the way, I highly recommend them. They're super interesting. So having taken care of those 4 parts, we went and deployed the device, we set it up, and after a few weeks, we were able to happily say Project Hairnet has been a success so far. So that was, I think, September last year. And since then, as happens, you put a device in the wild and or a service, and users start making requests. Oh, can I have this part here? Oh, can we add something here? And so we started having a list of can we haves. The first being automatic logout. So here's the problem. A user comes in, scans their chip card, it goes beep. They just take a look at what's for lunch, they order something, and then they just walk away. Oh, just like I did. Oh no, I'm sorry. Let's try this again. Right, I'll try and do that with less action this time. So, they scan their chip card, they order their lunch, and when they're done, they just walk away. And they leave their account logged in. So anybody else who comes in, scans their chip card, it goes beep, they're still in the account of that previous user. So it made total sense to have a system for automatically logging you out after some inactivity time. And it turns out jQuery has a neat little plugin for that where you can set not only how long you should wait until you display a little message saying, warning, you will be logged out. Then you have a little timer for how long that notice should show and have a logout URL path. I'll show you an example of how it works. It is in German, but it says at the top, due to inactivity, you will be logged out in 8 seconds for security purposes. Please tap here to stay logged in. With that, we were able to ensure that once people walk away and somebody else comes up, they see this notice and they think, oh, I'd better leave it or just click on log out. So that was part 1 of Can We Haves. Then we had an order pickup confirmation terminal request, which I know sounds like a lot, but what this is a device. The companies asked us for a device where people can come up to the cafeteria canteen, scan their chip card, it goes beep, and then the canteen staff could take a look at what that user had previously ordered and hand them their food accordingly, which, as you notice, sounds very similar to what Project Hairnet was. So we were able to not only reuse a lot of the user interface and logic, we were also be able to reuse a lot of the hardware. Now, having a big honkin' dedicated touchscreen computer seemed like overkill and would rack up the expenses very quickly. So what we did instead is we used a Raspberry Pi. Everybody familiar with Raspberry Pi? It's a very small, dedicated size of a credit card computer. And what you're able to do with that is hook it up to lots of little hardware pieces. For example, what we have here is a touch screen, so that when you would come up, scan your chip card, let it go beep, what it would do is show you what was ordered and whether it was picked up. You can see it says there, it's in German, it says order successfully picked up. And then this canteen staff could see what was ordered, which was great. We were even able to expand it so that if the user hadn't ordered anything on that day, we could send in some reserved dishes. And so if the user comes in and they said, hey, you didn't order anything, and then the user, it happens a lot that the user would go, oh, come on, I'm hungry. Can't I just get one of those schnitzels or something? Then the user would be able to select one of the reserved dishes, and they could be controlled accordingly. So you're probably wondering, do you have video? Oh, do I have video? I hope this works. I have no idea if it's going to work with audio, so I'll just do the beep myself. So fingers crossed. Beep. You can see there, it was successfully picked up. And then I go and I beep it again. Beep. You can see it says, in German it says, order was already picked up. This was a milestone for me. With this, I'm able to test my hardware at home and quickly deploy it to a company. And even this was just a couple of things that they asked us to do. Then we were able to expand on these ideas and go even further. Earlier this month, a new company signed on to this client of ours, and they said, we need to have a point of sale. What a point of sale is a cash register where people go up and they make their order, and then that gets logged into our database so that we can know who's ordering what and portion it accordingly. So on top of that, we use the same Raspberry Pi, we use the same touchscreen, and then I built a tiny little Vue.js app on top of this Rails app that lets you, you can see at the top, there's at the top here, there's a field for the user. You tap on that, you scan your chip card, it goes beep, and then it selects that user, and you can pick which dishes you would like to order and send them off. And the great thing about this is that it fits right into the cafeteria. At the top at the top left of the terminal there, you can see that there's the chip card scanner, and right next to the canteen, and then the staff can quickly make orders accordingly. Even that can be further expanded upon, because connecting this Raspberry Pi to, say, a thermal printer then lets you do receipts. And by having these small modular pieces working together, you can have your dedicated hardware for any use. So here's what I want you to take away from my talk today. Of course, reinventing the wheel is important. That's how we learn. But it's also important to remember that there are modular pieces of software and hardware existing that are cost effective that you can bring into your project and still make them successful. So go out there and play around with your existing technology. It's there and you can use it. So that's it for me. Thank you, everyone.